What about our culture makes mediocrity feel so normal? And is the church at fault too?
By calling, I'm not going to define it as your job. I think your job is an expression of your calling, not our ultimate call. St. Augustine would say, love God and
Mm,
then do as you please.
mm,
And that's a dangerous statement
mm.
out of context. But in context, I grew up obese. I have the metabolism where I can look at a brownie and gain weight. Sometimes in the evenings, I am so excited about my workout the next morning, I can't go to sleep because I'm so excited. Yeah, maybe that's probably not normal, but
No.
I just love it so much because we don't manage time.
Yep.
We manage our priorities. So you will always do what you want to do.
You were building these habits and routines, and now you're doing this every day. Does it ever get boring as someone who just graduated college and they want to do better, to have a routine? How do you make that jump from going from just willpower and discipline to, I guess, whatever it is beyond that?
Yeah, so uncomfortable truths. The church is light in the wrong ways and heavy in the wrong ways. I think the church should be heavy in doctrine and truth and light in body and vitality and be able to move quickly to adjust.
Can you create a leader from someone who's been a follower their whole life?
That's a great question. How do you tactically grow in your leadership ability? First step, you'll have 6 months of progress or 6 months of excuses. Excuses only sound good to the people using them. Do the work. Put in the work. I love Asia. People go to Europe to see the past, America to see the present, and Asia to see the future. And if you don't like that quote, you haven't been to Asia.
Yeah, so we're going to do some rapid fire questions. What is your definition of success? Welcome to the Christian Ambition Podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Matthew Weathers. Born in the United States, married to a native New Zealander, and father of 3 boys. Matthew is a reader, triathlete, traveler, and lifelong learner. He holds a PhD in intercultural studies. He lived in Asia for 6 years, teaching and leading multinational outreach center with over 1,000 student members. He has served in Christian higher education for nearly 20 years. In his current role as Chief Enrollment Officer at BJU, he raised over $1 million for student aid by completing 4 back-to-back full-length Ironmans on the Bob Jones campus. Known for his speed-talking and energetic personality, he has a focused passion for leadership development. Matthew is also the voice behind Steps to Thrive podcast, where he helps young Christians take meaningful steps to thrive by getting real about life, leadership, and personal growth. Dr. Weathers, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
So I know you all the way from my EduCamp days in high school.
Very cool.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then also interacting with you in the Center for Leadership Development in my roles as president of Entrepreneurship Network, and then also my first business, Stash My Stuff. It's a little storage business, and that was really fun to work together on that. And yeah, one of the big moments that stands out about my memory of you is your chapel message 2 years ago, where you read your Manifesto against mediocrity. That was just such a cool moment for me, and I'd actually like to read the first paragraph of that. I think it's just a great introduction. You can find the full thing on his website. That'll be in the description below. So here's the first paragraph. I have a hope for you today, a hope that you'll rise above the downward pull of mediocrity, a hope that you will rebel against the cultural norm of pursuing comfort and strive to pursue Christ, a hope that your love for the gospel will eclipse your love for the praise of man, a hope that you will have a broken heart for a broken world and have the courage to do something about it rather than look the other way. This is a manifesto against mediocrity. And this speaks right to my heart. And so my first question is, what led you to have such a conviction about this and speak out against mediocrity in such a strong way?
It's a great question. It is certainly a passion of mine to speak out against mediocrity. God has created us with a purpose, has created us with a mission. And for us to be lackadaisical or half-hearted about that would be a disservice to him and his glory and for what he created us to do. And I think often of the prayer of Moses in Psalm 90, verse 12, where he prays, Lord, teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. And just the concept of wisdom living well according to God's word and making wise choices in light of a biblical worldview, and knowing that our days are numbered. We have a finite number of days. We don't know that number, but God has given us the opportunity, the privilege, and the responsibility to maximize each day for his glory, because to whom much is given, much is required. And that verse actually used to intimidate me, but actually now it excites me, because what God calls us to, he will empower and equip us for. And that is it's an awesome reality that God, the creator of the world, can work in and through us to make a difference for eternity in the lives of others. So absolutely, let's have a manifesto against mediocrity and go all in. Only one life will soon be passed. Only what's done for Christ will last. A famous missionary.
Yes. What about our culture makes mediocrity feel so normal? And is the church at fault too?
So the world is full of broken sinners, and the enemy, Satan, is very happy for people to be swayed by the allurement of comfort, of popularity, of success, of all these things that our culture is preaching, teaching, and he is very happy to see that happen. But God has promised even that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, against his people moving forward, striving forward. And yes, the church is impacted by the culture, and we need to fight and stand against the culture and that temptation to sit back, be comfortable, let things be as they are. But we cannot be half-hearted about our pursuit of Christ and in advancing his kingdom in the lives of other people.
Hey, it's Editor Sven here. I'm on a journey to have powerful conversations with Christian leaders, thinkers, and doers. If you'd like to support that journey, please consider subscribing. It would mean the world to me. Back to the podcast.
What is the goal? So this is against mediocrity. What is it for then?
It's a great question. So actually, I've spoken in chapel more recently at school this last semester. I think it was actually the day after the Charlie Kirk assassination.
Oh, wow.
And integrated that event into my chapel message as a plea. And so I actually, at the end of chapel last semester when I was speaking, I read the exact same manifesto against mediocrity, but I changed the title. And at the end of each paragraph, instead of saying this is a manifesto against mediocrity, I said the same title that I changed it to, and it's actually that's something that I'm for. And I changed the title to this is a plea to pursue a higher calling. And God has given us a vocational calling, right? Our job, what we need to do to accomplish, to put food on table and clothes on our back. But even in that, like he did to Adam and Eve in the garden, he gave them meaningful work to do that we can and should do for his glory. But that's a means to the ultimate end of our higher calling, to whether we eat or drink or work, whatever we're doing, we want to do it ultimately to glorify God. We want to be reflections of him to a lost world who is in desperate need of the good news.
And so how is there a measuring stick where we're like, oh, I'm being mediocre now or I'm not? Or is it all relative, or how do I know?
It's a great question. I encourage students when I talk to them, don't compare yourselves to each other or to people who are years ahead of you in their Christian walk. That can be discouraging, right? Like I just turned 40, right? This is middle-aged, and I'm goofy looking and balding, but I got to embrace this time in my life. And I can look at maybe the 50 or 60-year-old for me and think, wow, there's so much more of this. They're so much better at that. Well, good. They're years ahead of me. I don't need to compare myself to them and be discouraged. I can look at them as an example for where I potentially could be as God continues to work in my life. But we don't want to compare ourselves to others around us or others that have gone before us necessarily. We want to compare ourselves to ourselves yesterday. Are we making steps today that are progressing us in our walk with God and our relationships with others to make what the big Bible word is sanctification, increasingly look like, act like, talk like, think like Jesus Christ, who is our Savior and example of the perfect leader.
When trying to figure out your calling, you then need to, I guess, find different areas where you're like, I need to grow in these things, and then somehow track them. Is it like actually tracking, or is it just after a while you're like, oh, I think I'm doing better?
Help me understand what you mean by calling in that question.
What God would have you to do, what his calling to you, so what your unique role in this life.
So by calling, I'm not going to define it as your job. I think your job is an expression of your calling. Brad Lomenick talks about this very concept in his book, 3 Leadership. I think you've read it. That's part of a class you may have been in that I may have been the teacher of. But it's a great book about habit formation. And he talks in that book about the difference between vocation and calling. And vocation is an expression of our calling, but not our ultimate calling, right? If God has called, let's say, someone to be a teacher, and that is a calling expressed in the New Testament, that God equips some to be teachers. Well, you may be a youth group leader, you may be a 4th grade teacher, you may be a pastor of a church. Those are your but your calling is to be a teacher, communicating truth and love to people to equip them, for them to grow in their knowledge and abilities as well. And for us to grow in our calling, we need to have some level of self-examination. So looking at how God has wired us, gifted us, we need to get feedback from those who love us and know us, and asking them questions like, hey, be honest with me. Where do you see my strengths? Where do you see my weaknesses? What advice do you have for me as I consider next steps in my life? So looking inward, asking outward, and ultimately looking upward. Asking God, James 1, any of you lack wisdom?
Yes.
Let him ask, right? And he'll give it to you. So
Yes.
constantly in a mindset of prayer. And this doesn't mean for those who may be feeling bad about their prayer life, like we all need to improve in our prayer life. And I like the quote. I was actually sharing this with some students yesterday. And the quote is not original with me, but the person was saying, I rarely pray for an hour every day, but I rarely go an hour without praying. And it's just this continual mindset of asking God for wisdom, asking God for help in a conversation or a task, and asking him to be at work in and through you. Those we consider calling, and what should we think about in next steps for life, I would encourage that maybe trifold approach between inward examination, outward asking, and upward praying.
How would you suggest going about figuring out exactly what that calling, that leading is? How have you heard your own calling in your life?
Okay, specifically you're asking about like the self-examination piece?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's lots of goofy tools out there. There's lots of helpful tools out there. Literally lots of tests and assessments that you can just take, and you answer random questions and it spits out these results. You know, Myers-Briggs, the DISC profile, the 6 working geniuses, several others. And I love to take these, not because they're perfect in assessing me, but generally speaking, the data that's been, the research that has been put into these assessments and the data they provide is actually really helpful for me and others, I think, to think about their skill sets and gifting. One of the things I do on the team that I lead at school is every new team member that joins us, they take the DISC assessment. And it's really helpful, and that gives us working language to communicate with each other about ourselves, about one another, what may be our strengths and areas for improvement, and how we can engage in conversation with one another. So it's really helpful for these tools, but also that second piece is asking other people, and then exploring what your passions are. Like I'll ask my sons, their ages 9, 6, and 1. I don't ask the 1-year-old, he can't talk yet, but the 9 and 6-year-old will say, hey, would you rather work in a job where you make a ton of money, but you hate it? Or would you rather work in a job that you don't make a lot of money, but you love it? And they know that we want to work in a job and in a vocation that we love, that there's something more valuable than dollars and cents, but a sense of fulfillment and excitement. And sure, ultimately, you would love to have a job that you love and makes a lot of money, right? Money is simply a tool and it magnifies who you are. The more you have, the more you can express who God has made you to be through philanthropy, through giving, through provision for your family and others. So there's nothing wrong with money. We don't want to be captivated, and we don't want to idolize money. Back to the illustration with my sons, that sense of passion. What do you love? What do you love? What does the world need? What needs exist in the world? And between what you love, what the world needs, and what can actually help produce an income, kind of look in the intersection of those things, because you don't necessarily want to live a life working a job that you absolutely hate.
Yes.
It's not very fulfilling, and you'll actually won't be as effective in that job for whatever company or ministry you may be working for.
And the Lord leads through the desires he gives you. So
Absolutely.
that's how you can
Psalm 37,
that.
he will give you the desires of your heart. But based on what? Seeking the Lord, seeking after Him. And He'll give to you desires in your heart. And often He'll help encourage you, lead you in the fulfillment of those desires.
So it starts with that seeking God.
Absolutely. Delight yourself in the Lord. That's your opportunity and responsibility to pursue God through His Word, through prayer, through fellowship with His people, primarily in a local church, delighting in the Lord. And He'll give you the desires of your heart. I used to think that verse meant, delight in the Lord and He'll give you what you want.
Yeah.
But He'll give you the desires of your heart. So St. Augustine, he would say, love God and then do as you please. And that's a dangerous statement out of context. But in context, if you're pursuing God, loving God, the desires that you have are from Him.
Yeah.
And so that's how he could say with confidence, love God and then do as you please, because a heart that is in love with God, the desires of the heart are God-honoring desires.
What would you say your greatest achievement is?
Boy, I probably every week, if not twice or 3 times a week, look at my wife and I say, honey, thank you for marrying me. And she will reply, well, thanks for asking. Greatest achievement, if that can be considered an achievement, and this is how I know miracles still happen, is because Fleur agreed to marry me. Like she's beautiful, she's talented, she has an accent of an angel, right? Being from New Zealand, and I'm kind of this goofy, guy, and have all these crazy ideas, and she agreed to marry me. So from an achievement standpoint, marrying her is high on the list.
Yes.
And then maybe just being the father of 3 crazy kids, never a dull moment in the Weathers household with 3 boys. I think one of my proudest moments as a dad was I was in our home gym working out, and my 6-year-old and 9-year-old were arguing over who would use the treadmill after Daddy was done. It's like, doing something right.
That is awesome.
So it was like early in the morning, and my 9-year-old now, he gets up early. He was out this morning in the garage practicing his soccer drills, before school. And
wow,
it was a lot of fun. I'll get in trouble with my neighbors for my kids like playing outside at 6 a.m. And so seriously, we have to bring them in. So we're an early morning family. That's
very
for
cool.
sure.
Cool. You've done a lot of endurance sports.
Yes.
So where does the 4 triathlons in a row fit in the things you've done?
From a physical achievement, that's definitely my top. 4 Ironmans in 4 days to raise $1 million by far. By far. I've done a whole bunch of Ironmans. I have a goal. One of my goals is to do an Ironman a year.
Okay.
Between ages 35 and 50.
Wow.
And I'll reevaluate at 50. And this last year I did 4 in 4 days, which kind of, exceeded that annual goal,
yes.
But it's for a good cause and it was a lot of fun. And just the story behind the story is incredible, how God worked and orchestrated that whole event to be successful. And the tagline, as your shirt says, empower the impossible.
Yep.
And so that was a tagline, and it was designed for two reasons, empowering the impossible, because number one, when you say, I'm going to do 4 Ironmans in 4 days, people are like, what's an Ironman? And you're like, well, actually the distance is it's swimming 2.4 miles. Then you get on a bike and you bike 112 miles. And you get off the bike and then you run a marathon, 26.2 miles. And then you do that 4 days in a row, which is incomprehensible for a lot of people physically. But I knew it is possible, was possible. But it felt that it was impossible to a lot of people hearing it for the first time. So that was one aspect of empowering the impossible. And the second was the financial piece, raising $1 million to help students who find it impossible to come to college because of the growing costs of higher education.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a dual-purposed tagline, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah, lots of stories how God orchestrated the events of the Iron 40 to get where we got.
Just looking at it, and I attended for each day just a little bit.
It was cool.
Really fun.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
Running around.
But the loop you were doing was like, what, 3/4 of a mile?
About 0.7.8.
0.7.8. And I'm like, it would make, that almost seems like the mental aspect of like the same loop over and over again.
I love it.
You love it? Okay.
I didn't have to think about it. It minimized decision fatigue, right?
Okay.
The fewer decisions you make, the more effective the decisions you have to make will be.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a certain amount of intellectual energy capacity on a daily basis, right? And so the more decisions you can automate, I wear the same thing very often. I eat the same exact food every day on a prescripted meal plan. Why? It's healthy, and I don't have to think about those things. Those are automated decisions. So now I have more intellectual capacity to invest in making decisions that actually matter and are meaningful. And so when I went around that loop hundreds and hundreds of times, I didn't have to think about where I was going. I just had to concentrate on production and the energy and the output. And that was actually very helpful for me.
Interesting. Okay, because I was looking at that, I'm like, man, I would love to go like run like real far and just have to do it twice. But I guess that makes sense because the physical aspect was, I mean, how close did you get to like, where like I could do this another day, or was this like, this is the end?
If the stakes were high enough, I could have done it another day. If you would have told me on day 5, hey, Matthew, if I'll give you another $1 million, I'll double your money. You do one more day, no problem. No problem. Because it's not about speed, which is helpful. It was about distance. And so I actually didn't calculate my speed at all during the Iron 40.
Okay.
It was all based on heart rate. It's a heart rate monitor, and my heart rate, I kept it at 120 or lower.
Wow.
And that was fine. Just keep going. And people outside of the triathlon world think this is crazy. But actually, some of my friends in the triathlon world, this is kind of, oh, cool. That's nice. My friend Will, for example, for his 65th birthday, he did 6.5 Ironmans. Right? I called him before the Iron 40 to ask for advice, and he was giving me advice. And my friend Lori, she did 10 Ironmans. And so I called her, and her husband actually came for the Iron 40 to help crew and provide sustenance. And it was a lot of fun. They were tracking my calories, my distance, and telling me what to eat and when. And there's a whole science behind the physical component of something like an Ironman or multiple Ironmans in a day. And the world record for Ironmans back-to-back is 120. So I'm far from the world record. Though from the research that we did, we believe this is a record in the state of South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
But no one's done 4 Ironmans in 4 days, at least that we could find.
That is pretty cool.
Representing the Palmetto State.
There we go. How many calories did you burn through?
Tens of thousands of calories.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah, I was eating all the time.
Wow.
It was great, Lots of carbs to output. So I can't eat like that on a normal day.
So no doubt a lot of people might be thinking like, what drives you to get up every morning and train for things like that? What is the motivation behind that? Because I mean, how long were you? Here's maybe a better question to start with. How long have you been training to get to that point?
A great question. I grew up obese. I love my family. They did not pass on to me the genes of an Olympian. I have the metabolism where I can look at a brownie and gain weight. I just gain weight super easy. My body physiologically, I retain calories. And so I have to be very careful because I know my body. And I was in high school, very overweight. And I got cut from the soccer team and was devastated. And my coach, my sophomore year of high school, he said, Matthew, if you want to make the team your junior year, here's a workout. So that summer, I followed the workout because my desire to make the team had superseded my desire for the donut, right?
Wow,
and so I said no to unhealthy things, and I said yes to healthy things. And it helped me learn the incredible importance of small decisions daily compound over time. So I stopped drinking soda completely when I was 15. That was 25 years ago. I've still never had soda since then. And I did all that workout that summer, lost about 30 pounds, came back my junior year of high school, and people actually couldn't recognize me when I walked on the school campus. They were shocked. Made the team junior year, made the team senior year, and that helped me understand the power of small decisions over time can compound to make massive differences. And I just kept making little decisions. And so since then, that kind of was the impetus for what I consider normal, what other people consider crazy. I think it's normal to get enough sleep, to eat healthy, nutritious, real food, to not drink soda that's poison for your body. You wouldn't give your dog soda because it's bad for them. Why do you drink it?
Yeah.
Same with donuts and brownies. Like, these are not good for your body. These are not fuel. These are things that will not help you maximize the energy that God has given you to serve other people. And so I consider all of these things normal. Getting up early, I love it. Sometimes in the evenings, I am so excited about my workout the next morning, I can't go to sleep because I'm so excited. Yeah, maybe that's probably not normal, but I just love it so much because I know what it does for me mentally and spiritually. Sweating every day, physical exertion is so helpful for me spiritually and growing. I get up every morning around 4:30. First thing I do, liter of water, then I spend time in the Word, and then when I pray, that's when I'm swimming, biking, running, or lifting weights because I'm more mentally engaged. See, I'm actually not spiritual enough to pray on my knees for an hour in the morning. I'll fall asleep. So I read the Word, go straight into my exercise, and that's when I spend time in prayer. I'm listening to music, maybe a podcast, praying, just kind of a mental time away where actually I'm able to double the usefulness of that time because I'm able to multitask with exercise physically and then spiritual nourishment through the Word, through prayer during that time. And so it helps you to maximize that time. And I want to do all of that before my kids are awake. Sometimes I wake up earlier, as we discussed, but I don't want my exercise to eclipse or negatively affect my time with family throughout the day.
What are the distances that you're usually training at?
So that's actually a pivot. So for the Iron 40, I was regularly running half marathons in the morning before I came to work. That'd be an hour and 45 minutes. So I'd train from 5 to 6:30, 5 to 7. That was that season. And now that I finished the Iron 40, and now that I am 40, and I'm middle-aged, and all of my exercise buddies and the research that I read on physical longevity encourages people my age to focus a lot on strength training, mobility, flexibility. So this year I have a different health coach. I had a health coach for the Iron 40 training, a professional triathlete coach. He actually sponsored the Iron 40 and provided coaching to me for free.
Wow.
Which I was thrilled about. Super nice guy, and he lives locally. But he had a training plan for me that was heavy on cardio, just putting in the base miles, swimming, biking, running, swimming, biking, running. Now that I finished that, I have a health coach. His name is Ben, and I've known him for a long time, but he does great work with clients. And actually, both my wife and I this year, we are working with him, and he gives us prescripted workouts every day and a prescripted meal plan to eat exactly the same things every day to help us accomplish our health and wellness goals. And so as I grow older, I want to maintain energy, vitality. And so I've done a lot more weight training, resistance training. And so now my workouts look a lot more home gym in our garage. We have some weights and that type of thing that I do now, rather than just getting on my bike and going for 2 hours or 3 hours.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, each time I open Strava, I'm like, Matthew Weathers did another 100 miles on the bike, at 4 a.m. I was like, what? Okay.
And now it's not so much, I'll do a few miles on the bike each morning just to warm up my body, and then I'll shift into the weight training.
Okay.
And so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. But one of those questions, Tyler Sherman, actually, it was along the lines of you're spending a lot of time with working out, and then you have Bob Jones, so you work. And most of us would be like really tired at the end of the day. And so like, how do you also balance all of those different things within family time?
Great question. I appreciate the question. So thank you for asking the question. I get that question a lot, actually. And I have found, like a train on the tracks, that the closer the train stays on the tracks, the faster and more efficient the train can be. So that means the more structure I have in my life, the more efficient and effective I can be with the limited hours in the day and the limited energy in the day. And so we all have 24 hours. How do we use those? Well, if we structure those, we actually can use them, I think, better. They say a ship that is enslaved to the compass has the freedom of the seas. So if you have something that is helping you navigate life, like a compass, you actually have more freedom. Jocko would say discipline equals freedom.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And from a time management standpoint, people often say, I struggle with managing time. No, you don't. We all have the same number of hours. We don't manage time. We manage our priorities. So you will always do what you want to do. And so we have to organize our desires, right? So if I told you, Sven, what's your favorite sport?
Soccer.
Okay, what's your favorite soccer team?
Bayern.
Okay, so if I told you, hey, I got some tickets to the Bayern Munich game tomorrow, can you come? Are you going to say, well, actually, no, I need to edit a podcast? What are you going to say?
100%.
You're 100% going to be there because that has now become a priority for you,
Yes.
right? So you will figure out the timepiece, but you now have a priority opportunity and you're going to take it. Right? Everyone does what they want to do. So we have to order our priorities and our desires rightly. So that's foundational. And then as far as execution, you have to put the big things in first, right? You've maybe seen the illustration with the bucket.
Yes.
You put in the big rocks 1st.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So I would encourage people to consider what are their big rocks, right? We have key relationships in our life, our relationship with God. If you're married, your relationship with your spouse. If you're a parent, relationship with your kids. If you're single, relationship with God, honoring peers and your church group. These are important relationships in our life. Jesus was single and he had really important relationships with people close to him, right? So this is a biblical thing to prioritize relationships and to put the big rocks in first. And from like, what does my day look like? I structure it around those priorities. Right? So wherever your priorities are, make your calendar reflect those priorities and then follow the calendar.
How much discipline does your schedule take at this point?
Now, almost none. It's just automated.
Yeah.
Right. It has taken years to tinker and figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. I've always been captivated by the concept. The Stoics would use the Latin phrase, memento mori. Remember, you're going to die.
Yes.
Right. And it sounds very much like Ecclesiastes.
Yes.
But the end isn't all is vanity. The end is remember your creator. Right? There is a higher purpose in the limited time that we have. And so maybe back to that initial question about like priorities, you figure out what are the priorities and then you put them in the calendar. Like I get up at 4:30 most days, straight into a liter of water and Bible, straight into exercise, straight in, and while exercising, spiritual reflection and meditation on what I just read and prayer. Then I go straight into helping my kids get up, get ready for school. We leave for school around 7:20 every day, drop them off at school. I get to the office around 7:40. I do the same exact thing when I get to the office every day. And then my meetings start usually around 8:30 or 9. And then that's all structured on a calendar throughout the day. And I try to, at lunches, there's a book called, I think it's called Never Eat Alone. It's utilizing meals to build relationships with others. So I have lunches scheduled out, I think, till March at this point.
Wow.
Because I want to utilize that time to build relationships with others and invest in others and be invested in by others. And then I try to finish my work between 5 and 6, go home and we eat family dinner together as a family. And we always ask the same questions at dinner. And I'll have my kids learn how to ask questions at dinner. So I'll say, hey, Johnny, ask mommy a question about her day. And he can't say, mommy, how was your day? No, that's too easy, right? Ask a meaningful, thoughtful question about mom's day. And we'll have conversation. And then rather than asking my sons, what did you do today? Because that's typical. And they'll say, school, how was today? Fine. We'll give the one-word answer.
Yep.
So force an answer. Ask a question that forces more than a one-word answer. So I'll say, hey, Johnny, hey, Petey, my 2 older sons that can talk. Tell me about a time at school today that made you happy. Tell me about a time at school today that made you sad. Tell me about a time today at school that made you frustrated. Tell me about a time at school today when you did something for other people. Because when I drop them off at school in the morning, I always tell them 3 things before they get out of the car. I did it this morning. I said, hey, Johnny, at school today, be kind to your friends, obey your teachers, and be a leader. That's all I say. I don't say make an A on your test. I say be kind, obey your teachers, and be a leader. And we define leadership for them at this stage in their life as what is a leader? A leader is someone who helps other people. That's it. Helping other people. And so at the end of the day, I'll ask them, how was the day? And what did you do? And how did you help other people? And then after dinner, they help us clean the dinner table and do the little chores. And then we shift into maybe playing Uno or talking, or one of their grandparents got us a little foosball table for Christmas. And so we love playing foosball now. And also, usually after dinner, I will read some verses from a proverb of the day. And as I read those verses, I'll say, hey, guys, after I read these verses, tell me what was your favorite one and why. And so they're listening and they'll tell me what was their favorite one and why. And sometimes family devotions implodes and explodes, and that's fairly typical for families with young kids. But you just want to have that rhythm of consistency that they know that you value God's word in our family. And then we go into bedtime, and bedtime, Fleur, my wife, and I will both be there for bedtime after bath time, which can be an adventure in itself, with the 1-year-old especially. But at bedtime, we'll pray with them and we'll do verses and teaching them verses. And they've learned a whole bunch of verses by now. And then after verses, lights off, and they'll go to bed around 8-ish. And then my wife and I will talk, we'll read, and then we'll actually go to bed at around 9 or 9:30, pretty early. And then we'll sleep and up at 4:30 and up the next day. So that's a typical day in the Weathers household.
Very cool. And what happens when something gets in the way or you're not at home?
Great question. I travel a lot. Yep. So there's always things that come up. And I just told you like the standard template day, but there's always things that come up. Like we have church life group once a week in the evenings. We have a lot of events at school sometimes in the evenings. And I don't like to bifurcate or separate ministry, vocation, and family. So as many events with students that I can bring my kids to, we go to. Last week, I brought my kids to the International Student Organization Lunar New Year party at the CGO. It was great. They got to try dumplings and see all the students that were from around the world, and it was great. So bringing kids to these things as it's age appropriate and not too late in the evening past their bedtime. When I'm traveling, a lot of FaceTime interaction, and then my wife, she is awesome. She is a superhero, and she'll just take charge and do all the things as much as possible when daddy's traveling.
You were building these habits and routines, and now you're doing this every day. Does it ever get boring, or is that in of itself doing it good, exciting?
So if you ask Warren Buffett about his investing strategy, he would probably talk about the virtue of patience and making a few investments and holding them, and it being a very boring investment strategy is actually very effective. And other, writers and sometimes podcasters will say things like, excellent is actually your ability to be bored for a very long time doing the same things over and over and over. Compound, and in the financial space, compound interest is very boring, but that's the way to remarkable exponential growth. And I think too, in the personal development space, in the spiritual development space, is it boring reading the same book every day called the Bible? Maybe. But if we approach it knowing that this is the living word of God, it's alive and it's powerful, and whether or not we feel anything or sense anything, we know that God's doing something with his word coming into my heart, and to do it over and over and over and over and over, and to embrace the boredom, knowing that that's the pathway to progress.
As someone who just graduated college, or maybe some of my listeners who are in college, and they want to do better, they want to have a routine, live by a calendar. And all too often, though, we say, okay, this is important. I need to work out, whatever it is, 3 times a week. Going to book it. But then when it comes to it, then you're like, I have other things and they move around, or I just don't feel up to it. Or how do you get to that, like enjoying the boring and realizing this is so important? How do you make that jump from going from just willpower and discipline to, I guess, whatever it is beyond that?
Yeah, so I was listening to a talk by a vice president of Chick-fil-A a few years ago, and they were talking about the primary things that motivate us. Number one is pain. This is like touching a stove. Oh, that's hot. That will motivate you to action. Pain. Second one was fear of consequences. And the third was a vision of a better future. And of those 3, the first and second, pain and fear, may seem more effective, and they may be in the short term. But in the long term, vision of a better future is actually what motivates and compels people. It does for me, right? I'm not afraid of anything if I miss a morning workout. I'm excited about the morning workout because of what I know it is doing for me, which is ultimately increasing Matthew's capacity to love God and love others. Working out and being disciplined for me as a believer isn't ultimately about looking good and feeling good. Looking good, I gave up a long time ago. Like I'm kind of goofy. I'm balding, right? This is midlife, and okay, embrace it. Feeling good, yeah, I actually feel great. I have a lot of energy. I'm not tired. I don't drink coffee. I have no mid-afternoon crashes. It's go, 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 go. Not because I'm super energetic inherently. It's because of choices over decades that have given me the energy that I have today. And I'm thankful for that. And so I do feel better, but that's not the end in itself. The end is increased capacity for serving others. Just like the airplane illustration, in case of a oxygen disturbance, flight mask will drop from the ceiling. Put yours on first before assisting others. Why? So that you can assist others. Well, you need to be breathing to assist others. And for me, I think it's important to focus on health and wellness from a physical standpoint so that I can help others. Health and wellness isn't the goal, it's the means to the goal of expanding capacity, because to whom much has been given, required. It's tough as a college student. When things get in the way, like friends, and you have to manage priorities. And I would discourage people from saying yes too much to friends and social events when they're saying no to their personal walk with the Lord. That's a big rock that we need to form habits around and to anchor our hearts. I encourage and challenge students every day, open your Bible before you open your phone. If your phone is on your Bible, get a paper Bible. We're too easily distracted. And we want the Word speaking to us rather than the world speaking to us first thing in the morning.
So creating that vision of the future would be like the first step to being consistent.
Jesus said things about this, and he said, I came to give life and to give it abundantly. Right. I think it's easy for young people. It was for me as a young person to think, oh, the Christian life, it is this life of meagerness and of smallness and of, just wringing my life out for Jesus. Guess what? There's a lot of truth in that. There is a meagerness to the Christian life. There is a smallness to the Christian life, and there is a wringing out to the Christian life. But that is in context of a greater mission and vision of making disciples of all nations. The kingdom of heaven was never advanced by men and women of caution, but men and women who were inspired and compelled to fulfill the Great Commission. And the Great Commission, I think, is fueled by obedience to the Great Commandment, right? We love God and love others. That compels us to make disciples of all nations. And Christianity isn't this religion that kills joy and shrivels you up and that you endure. No, it's a relationship with a living God that is joyful. People forget, I think, sometimes to focus on the fruits of the Spirit, like love and joy. Joy is a fruit of God's Spirit that He's working and growing in His people as they walk with Him. And the Christian life is one of abundance, not necessarily of material goods. God does have that for some people, which is great for them to use in the service of other people. But the abundance is one of a relationship with God. Like the Beatitudes talks a lot about the contrast even between what the world considers to be abundance and what Christ in His kingdom considers to be abundant. And we need to pursue a life of abundance in Christ. And that's a life of love and joy and peace, patience and kindness and goodness. And as we are growing in these fruits of the Spirit, that is an abundant life. And so that vision of a better future, it's daily progress towards that.
Is that the first thing you would counsel somebody to, like, what beliefs do they need to have? What do they need to change on the belief level to get to a point where they can have this daily routine and habit to thrive?
So foundationally, as believers, increasingly knowing and being in awe of who God is. We have endless desires in our heart, some of them good, some of them wicked, right? We are fallen people, and praise the Lord for His grace. But we have desires. I have a desire for, it will be obvious and simple. I have a desire for food. I like food. I have a desire for warmth and clothes on my back, daily provisions. I have a desire to have healthy friendship. Those are all wonderful things, but those cannot replace or supersede my desire to honor and glorify God each and every day, and keeping our desires in context. And our ability and our ability to grow in our love for God, we need to be in His Word. Corinthians talks about we are changed from one degree of glory to the other as we are interacting with the living God through His Word. And one phrase to summarize that is we become as we behold. we become like Christ as we behold Christ. And for us to be captivated by Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world who forgave us of our sins. And maybe an illustration of this is in the New Testament, the lady who came and gave all she had in ointment. She cleaned Jesus' feet with her hair, and other people were like, that was really expensive. And Jesus was like, that's the point. She was forgiven much. She loves much. And as we realize our sinfulness, our evil hearts that are desperately wicked, and we see that God in his love for us forgave us, that's grace. And that kills a temptation in us to be legalistic and to compare ourselves to others spiritually and feel better about ourselves. Like our spiritual progress isn't based and shouldn't be based on how we feel about our performance. Bad plan. It's on what Jesus did for us, and that fuels us to live for his glory. And we can live not for grace and not to earn grace, but we live from grace in a position of grace of what Jesus has done for us.
What season in life shaped you the most?
What season in life shaped me the most? I was actually listening to a podcast recently talking about seasons of life and how even seasons of life like spring, like that's our youth. Summer, that's our midlife. Fall, that's our later years. And winter, that is as we're concluding our life here on earth. Like that's a kind of an overview of the year superimposed on the life. And right now in that season, I would probably be in the summertime. Like I'm done with my spring. Like I'm maybe youthful, but I'm not a youth, right? I am middle aged, and I want to maximize this time in my life to produce and to do good in the world, but also to invest in those that are in their youth and younger generations. Because I made plenty of mistakes, and if I can help someone learn the easy way that I had to learn the hard way, I would love to do that. Learn the easy way if you can and avoid mistakes that others have made. You can do that by talking to mentors. You can do that by reading books. And so in this season of life, I want to do as much good as possible for as many people as possible, to encourage them, to challenge them, and to invest in them, particularly those that are in their current spring.
A quote from you: have a growing desire to be confronted with uncomfortable truths that lead to life rather than being coddled with comfortable lies that lead to death. So what are those uncomfortable truths?
Great quote. That's from the Manifesto against Mediocrity, or the plea to pursue a higher calling, whichever title we want to use. Uncomfortable truths: the church is light in all of the wrong ways and heavy in all of the wrong ways. The church should be light in body and heavy in doctrine. Unfortunately, there are many in the church who are heavy in body and light in doctrine. Primarily in the American church, there are a lot of church goers and church members who do not realize the weightiness and the significance of the local church, and it is a convenience or even at sometimes a social advantage to be connected to a church. But when we realize that Christ died for the church, he loves the church, he gave himself for the church, and that is the primary body through which the Great Commission will be accomplished. There's a weightiness to that. There's an awe to that. And we as an American church need to be confronted with that. That globally speaking, there's a lot of amazing things that are happening through the church. And some of those are through the American church for sure. But I think on a larger scale, we as an American church can do better in confronting reality and ultimately pursuing Christ-likeness in our endeavors, and not being distracted by things that are so often maybe a good thing, but are distracting to us. And so some of the uncomfortable truths in regards to the American church, and I use the phrase, the church is light in the wrong ways and heavy in the wrong ways. I think the church should be heavy in doctrine and truth and light in body and vitality, and be able to move quickly to adjust. But sometimes we're heavy in body. We're kind of lazy, lethargic as a church. And even personally, I think there's a lot of church members who could do better in regards to their own physical health and wellness, and remember that gluttony is a sin, and that we need to take care of the one temple that God has given us so that we can more effectively serve others. But I would love to see a church growing in weighty doctrine and light in body and ability to move and do missions and be at work, rather than light in doctrine and heavy in body, just kind of there and lazy and lethargic. But we need to be pursuing the advancement of the kingdom.
Yeah, and there is that aspect of heavy in body, literally, where it affects everything you do, energy levels, the way you can think and act and serve, and also being, I guess, not quite as literally, but as a church, I feel like this is one big reason why I started Christian Ambition. Because I'm like, when I go on social media, I see a whole lot of people on fire to hit these goals and things. And it seems a lot of times, if you weren't called to be a pastor or a missionary, it just felt like, okay, well, get a good job and give 10%. Like, that doesn't seem right. I believe the Great Commission for everyone, every Christian. And so that being light in body, being able to be agile in that way, that really does speak to me.
Yep. And what the New Testament talks about is pastors and teachers in the church, they are to, the verse says, equip the saints for the work of the ministry. The pastor-teacher job is to equip the local church member to do effective ministry in and through their daily vocation, in and through their community involvement, in and through their family and extended family involvement. And for Christians to not be ambitious for self. There can be a self-serving component to ambition that we need to be careful of, but we do need to be ambitious or eager to maximize the Christian message to a dying world through our words and through our life. Because our life has to be able to back up what our words are saying. And so that means intentional choices, thoughtful choices, self-disciplining choices, and saying no to self. Would I like to do a lot of stuff? Yeah. Would it be best for me, for my family? No. I love snowboarding. Should I take a week-long trip to Colorado and leave my wife and kids at home? Not just for that sake. That there's another purpose for it, and that's understandable. But just for me, because I want, probably not the best idea. But no, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my sons snowboarding to be with them. I call it dad and lad time. Spending time with the boys, doing stuff outside to teach them and spend time with them. There's a greater purpose to that.
Pivoting to talk about leadership, you were the leader of the CLD, Center for Leadership Development, for several years. Real quick, can you tell us a little bit what the CLD does?
Sure. I love the Center for Leadership Development. It is kind of a hub on campus for student organizations and leadership development training and equipping. And I call student leadership kind of the messy middle between the classroom and the career. Because the classroom's great, faculty are awesome, they teach, they have syllabus, they give tests, quizzes, points, and then, they give the grade, they give the credits, and we're all good, and we're on to the next class. Maybe there's some messiness and projects and stress, but fairly clean and tidy. Student leadership is altogether a different animal, right? There's drama, there's tears, there's meetings, there's learning how to communicate, learning how to delegate, learning how to manage time, learning how to plan events. All these skills of working with other people connected to leadership opportunities that I think are invaluable for students to learn while they're students, and that was kind of run through and managed by the Center for Leadership Development.
It was really cool working with the CLD and on developing those skills. And yeah, definitely the most valuable part of college was not the classes. They were great classes. It was the leadership positions that I was able to take part in, because those are the skills I'm using to.
I'd say your classes were really valuable, and sometimes students always don't realize the value of the class and in-class instruction until later.
Sure.
And so I don't know that I would juxtapose one was more or less valuable, but as a complete experience in your higher education opportunity, there were things that were maybe more valuable to you than you had anticipated, such as co-curricular leadership opportunities.
Yeah. And so a lot of people, a lot of founders have to build a team and develop leaders. They usually only do it once. You build the leader and then you let them run it. But in your former role as the leader at the CLD, you had to be developing new leadership teams like every year. So how do you recognize those leaders?
That's a great question. At first, it was frustrating that you had to start over every year, but then it became joyful because you could see over years what God was doing in the lives of students that came through, graduated, and impacted communities. I remember talking to a former society president at a wedding after she graduated and asked, "Hey, how did your society leadership experience, how's it impacting you?" And she said, "Actually, I have the job I have because of my society leadership experience. I'm 21 years old and I'm leading meetings of people twice my age. A lot of that through my co-curricular leadership experiences through the Center for Leadership Development." That was really satisfying. And so like every year the turnover, it was like, oh, new students, but great new students to invest in, to pour into. And there would just be a cycle of leadership development training and conversations and seeing students grow throughout the year. That was always a lot of fun. As far as me choosing them, actually, I chose very few, if any of them. The way it worked in the Center for Leadership Development and student organizations, they were all often voted on by their peers. And so those election results ended up being the students that I was privileged to work with.
Could you recognize what were the key traits of maybe the more successful leader?
I think that Stephen Covey's book is helpful, not just for 7 habits of highly effective people, but 7 characteristics of successful and increasingly successful leaders. And the first characteristic he writes about in that book is takes initiative. And leaders that take initiative end up having more leadership opportunities. Simply raising your hand and saying, "I'm willing to serve in this leadership position," is a huge step for a lot of students, which I commend them for.
So having that initiative, showing that agency, can you create a leader from someone who's been a follower their whole life?
That's a great question. I actually, in my view and perspective of leadership development, don't strictly categorize people into leaders and followers. I use a phrase called contextual leadership. For example, different people are leaders in different situations. So my wife and I, if we go to the gym and we run a marathon, am I coaching her or is she coaching me? Usually in that context, I'm coaching her. I'm leading her in that situation. However, if we go to the kitchen and one of her hobbies is cooking, I actually get more nervous about preparing a meal for people than I do about speaking in front of 1,000 people. I get nervous in the kitchen trying to put it all together. And if I wanted her to coach me through, cooking a dinner for 20 people, which would really make me nervous, she could do that blindfolded. She loves it. It's therapeutic for her. And she's now on the kick of making homemade bread, which is amazing. We can't eat it on our meal plan, so our kids eat it for their school lunches, but it's really good when I have been able to eat it in the past. But she does it and she loves it. And so in that context, if she was coaching me through cooking, she's the leader. And so I don't think someone is a leader or a follower, end of story, but different people have different skills and abilities which they can lead others towards in that certain context. But I believe that people may be born with leadership capabilities, more or less, but I don't think someone is born never able to lead or never able to influence others. And I think everyone can grow in their leadership ability and their opportunity to influence other people. I like John Maxwell's definition of leadership, simply that of influencing others. And I Christianize it to say I think biblical leadership is influencing others towards Christ. Because there can be a leader that has influence that can lead people in very bad directions and do very terrible things. But biblical leadership is leading people, influencing people towards Christ. And everyone has that opportunity, even a 7-year-old with his 5-year-old brother.
So growing in leadership, is that just reading more books, just getting more reps? How do you develop them?
So how do you tactically grow in your leadership ability? First step, we just talked about initiative, having that desire, and then thinking through how to tactically take steps to grow. And I like to use the structure of Jesus's growth and development. All we know about Jesus between ages 12 and around 30 is one verse, one of my favorite verses, and I teach and talk about it a lot, Luke 2:52. Jesus increased in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God, and favor with man. And that word increase, like the Greek idea is moving forward in spite of obstacles. Just keep going. So Jesus, as a young teenager and young adult, he just kept going. He just kept going. He just kept going. In what ways? Wisdom, stature, favor with God, favor with man. And I broadly define those as wisdom is intellectual development. So developing our minds, developing our thinking ability. He developed in stature. I define that broadly as physical development. he ate food. He was probably a pretty strong dude. If you realize in the temple when he was throwing over the tables, do you know how many people opposed him? None that we read of.
Okay.
They were not going to mess with him. Like if he was a wimp and if he was fat and overweight and he couldn't lift the table, there was probably be some pretty strong guys that would have come and said, "Hey, knock it off," and he would have, shrunk away. No, they did not mess with him. I imagine he had some weight to throw around
and all that.
Absolutely, working with his hands and heavy stuff, right? And so he grew. He developed in his stature, then favor with God. He developed. I define that as spiritual development and being the God man. In his human capacity, he did grow and develop his exposure to the Old Testament scriptures, and then he developed in favor with man relationally. How did he take steps to get along with other people? And so I encourage students and young adults to consider how can they grow intellectually. And this is reading books, listening to podcasts, learning how to write, learning how to communicate, these skills in communication and in thinking. And there's lots of great recommendations on how and what to read and to be exposed to for the intellectual piece. For the physical piece, how can you increase in stature? This is doing the hard work to eat good food, move your body. There's a book called Eat, Move, Sleep that I like to recommend. And a quote, people can't complain about results they don't have from work they didn't do.
Yep.
You have to put in the reps, in the reps day after day after day after day. And then 6 months from now, a year from now, you'll have 6 months of progress or 6 months of excuses. Excuses only sound good to the people using them. Don't make excuses. Do the work. Put in the work. A lot of guys of my age, they were all excited to get in shape for their wedding, and they fell off for their marriage, right? And I encourage young people, if you are motivated, young men, to get in shape for your wedding, and if you love your fiancé enough to get in shape for your wedding, you should love your wife enough to stay in shape for your marriage. That's when you're protecting and providing for your wife and for your family. Don't get lazy. Do the hard work. But stop it. Do the hard work to protect and provide for your family. And then Jesus increased spiritually his favor with God. So this is time in the Word. This is time in church. This is memorizing Scripture. This is prayer. This is the spiritual disciplines. And then relation with man. How can you grow relationally? This is leaning in rather than pulling out in regards to other people. Maybe you're not as outgoing and, well, you can flex those muscles. Don't say, I'm an introvert, so I can't. Say, I'm an introvert, so I must, right? So you have to lean in and do the hard thing. And we were not designed to live the Christian life in isolation, right? We were designed to live the Christian life in community with other people. We have to grow in our relationships with other people. So that's kind of a structure I use to encourage people tactically. How do you grow? How do you increase like Jesus? And so that's what I would encourage in community.
Yeah. Big problem that I have reading books is I'll read a book when I do, and then someone's like, so how was it? I'm like, oh, it was really good. They're like, what did you learn? I'm like, it was really good. And so how do you actually remember things?
Great
how do you
question.
apply? Because it's one of the more annoying things.
Okay, so you read a book, let's pretend it's 200 pages.
Yeah.
You're going to remember maybe a half a page. And that's okay. Can you tell me, Sven, what you ate for breakfast 3 weeks ago? No. But how do I know you ate breakfast 3 weeks ago? You're alive today.
Yes, I'm alive.
Right? We don't remember all the things that have contributed to us who we are physically, same mentally and intellectually. We've taken in things and we can always remember all of them, but they've impacted us. But how do we specifically remember things from books? What I do, I read a lot of books on my Kindle. I can highlight in the Kindle, and that automatically imports into my Goodreads app. So I can go to Goodreads, look at any book I've read, pull up all my highlights. And if you said, what books have you read lately? Pull it up. And if you said, what'd you learn from them? This quote was meaningful. And I'll remember through that quote what I read from that book. And then talking about what you've read with your friends. This is part of relational development that can complement with intellectual development. Maybe once a week meeting with some buddies and say, hey, let's go through a book, let's read a chapter and then talk about it. That's what my wife and I did when we were dating and engaged. We were long distance because she was in New Zealand. I was in China.
Okay.
And we were doing long distance. And every week we would read a chapter from a book, connect, and talk about it. And we would mutually encourage one another through that way. So book reading is helpful. Some people like audiobooks. I'm not a big audiobook guy. I like podcasts, but for books, I like to read them. It allows me to highlight. And then for book excerpts and quotes that are particularly impactful, I will literally copy it and then I'll paste it into a note that I have. I use Evernote. And so I have a note in Evernote called Leadership Quotes. And it's dozens and dozens of leadership quotes that I like and have been impacted by in my reading. And I'll put that in that note.
You mentioned you lived in Asia.
Yes.
How did you get there? What was that all about?
Great question. Yeah. So I grew up in Christian school, graduated from college in 2007. My plan was to go to grad school, and God completely redirected, and I didn't have a plan my second semester senior year. My plan blew up, right? And so what am I going to do? And was made aware of an opportunity of teaching English in Asia and interviewed and was offered the job. And I graduated in May, and in August, I was on a plane to Shanghai, China. And I was teaching English there at a medical school, and I taught at a few other schools in China. My plan was to go for a year and then come back for grad school. In God's kindness, He allowed me to be there for 6 years. I did my master's degree online while I was in China. And that was a lot of fun. I did it in cross-cultural studies while living and teaching in China, and had the opportunity to serve there teaching, but also leading a multinational student activities club called Life Pegs, which was the tagline was adventures you can hang your life on. And so we would do adventures like hikes and biking trips and overnight camping trips and outdoor adventures with students at local area colleges. And we would get to know them, build relationships with them, and get to invest in their lives as well. It was a lot of fun. We had over 1,000 members in that outdoor adventure organization. And we would even do English teaching for them on the side and like interview workshops and tips for that type of personal development as well there. So that was a lot of fun working with other foreign teachers that we were teaching with to help provide some of that content to the Student Activities Club.
What are the most interesting things about Chinese culture from spending several years?
I love Asia. I've heard the quote that says people go to Europe to see the past, America to see the present, and Asia to see the future. And if you don't like that quote, you haven't been to Asia. And it is a remarkable continent. And between multiple countries over there, from a tech advancement standpoint, from an integration of technology into the society standpoint, some of it's incredible, some of it's really scary, frankly, that we need to be careful of and not adopt quickly or unthoughtfully. But I remember being in Seoul, South Korea, 10 or 15 years ago, and the subway lines there was 4 levels of subways over each other. I was on the bottom level, so hundreds of feet underground, and I was on my cell phone, and people were watching live stream things on their cell phone. So they figured out connectivity to the internet on a subway car, hundreds of feet underground, mind-blowing tech at the time. Now we're not as awed by that because of advancement since then, but that was like many years ago.
Yeah.
And like Wi-Fi, we still had Wi-Fi problems, in our hotels in America, and they're 4 levels down, on a subway car buzzing underneath the earth, connected, massively fast speeds.
Wow.
So just the tech advancements, the technology advancements, the megatropolises in Asia, the urban life is incredible. At the same time, there are also places in Asia that are decades behind from a development standpoint, third world countries, and the contrast between opulence and tech and poverty can sometimes be the distance of one road. I remember traveling in India, and we were driving down the road. On this side is the Taj Mahal. Like literally, we were at the Taj Mahal. On the other side of the road, poverty, complete poverty. And just the juxtaposition of societies in third world context, whether it's some opulence and poverty in such close proximity, it's sobering, frankly.
Since coming back to the U.S., have you been to Asia?
Yeah, I have a bunch of times. I love it. I was just there a couple months ago. Have had the privilege of traveling to 40 countries, and I'm actually heading to Croatia in a couple months for a conference. I'm looking forward to that as well, being back in Europe. But in Asia, just the incredible number of countries there and the diverse cultures there That's something I absolutely love and love being back in Asia. The people there, the food is really good, except the spicy food. I'm not a huge spicy food fan. Spicy food doesn't like me very much.
No.
I have to be careful with that. But the flavors, the food, the people, the culture, the landscapes. Generally in Asia, it's easier and less expensive to travel throughout the continent, whether it's planes, trains, buses, cars, taxis. It's fairly inexpensive. So that's kind of nice. I remember I was in Paris traveling from the airport, Charles de Gaulle, to downtown Paris. And it was like, for my wife and I, almost $50 to ride the train a few miles. And I was so frustrated, having lived in Asia for a bunch of years where you could get all around for very inexpensively.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's nice. Cost of travel in Asia and public transport in Asia is really convenient.
I was thinking we could do some rapid fire questions.
Or whatever you want.
Yeah, so we're going to do some rapid fire questions. If mediocrity is the enemy, what is the first action someone listening today needs to make?
Mediocrity is an enemy, not if. And so I would say maybe someone needs to know that mediocrity isn't a potential enemy. It's clinging to all of us, pulling us down. And that's just the cultural tide is one of doing less and doing less effective things for the kingdom. And so realize the world we're living in and maybe read the essay by C.S. Lewis called Learning in Wartime. It's a short essay, but it's a good read for Christians and the world that we're living in, learning in wartime.
That'll be linked below. What are eulogy virtues?
I was talking about this in class yesterday, so thank you for bringing that up. So this is something that I learned from the introduction to a book called The Road to Character by David Brooks, and he contrasts eulogy virtues and resume virtues. Resume virtues are things that a lot of young people are really concerned about, and they want to put them on a resume to get a job, to have a career. Things like dynamic speaker, great communicator, event planner, these talents or qualities about you that you think could be valuable to a company for a career. A eulogy virtue is what people talk about at your funeral. These are things like loving father, kind friend, faithful church member. These are the things that people remember you for. No one cares that you were a dynamic communicator, right? They cared if you showed up at the hospital when they were sick. They cared if you sent them a text that you were praying for them. People don't care as much about how much you know. They care about how you make them feel and how you care for them. My dad would often say, Matthew, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And the knowing is a lot about the resume virtues, and the caring is a lot about the eulogy virtues. And we as Christians need to live our lives always with the end in mind. That's number 2 of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. For Christians, our end is death, which is a doorway to eternal life. We need to think daily, I think, of that reality, living with the end in mind, and that will help us. That helps me pursue eulogy virtues, not resume virtues.
Yeah.
And we want resume virtues, but those are tools along the way to pursue eulogy virtues and to invest in other people.
What is a unique habit of yours that is not common or most people don't know about?
Part of my new health nutrition plan with our new health coach, every day I get up and I said I drink a liter of water. Right before that, I have 4 ounces of alkaline water with a different pH level. I add in a scoop of leafy greens, so green vegetables blended up into a powder, and a half teaspoon of baking soda. And I shake that up and I drink that. And then I wait 5 minutes before I drink my liter.
Okay.
And that helps internally with digestion. And it's kind of a weird, wonky thing, but my health coach is a big fan of it, and I'm thankful to give it a go. And so that's kind of weird and wonky.
Yeah.
So that might be a weird habit. Trying to think of other things. I do a lot of weird things that I don't think is that weird.
What is your definition of success?
Definition of success, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. A life lived for the glory of God is a supremely successful life. We don't want to get to the end of our life at the top of the ladder and realize that ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. The strides we make, the ladders we climb, needs to be leaning against the wall of honoring and glorifying God with your one precious life.
What is the kindest thing someone's done for you?
Apart from my wife marrying me, the kindest thing someone has done for me. I think during my senior year of college, I was having a deep struggle of faith. I think young adults in different seasons ask deep questions and are sometimes confronted with answers or perceived answers that make them feel uncomfortable. And I was going through a deep spiritual struggle my senior year of college. And some of the things people did for me during that months-long struggle in my heart were some of the kindest things that people had ever done for me, and I will never forget it. The patience they demonstrated towards me, walking through a season of prolonged darkness, really, and the kindness that was shown to me, I will not forget that. I'm very thankful for that.
If you could sit down with your 20-year-old self for 5 minutes, what would you tell?
My 20-year-old self for 5 minutes: love God, love others, worry less, laugh more. I encourage young people to be more excited about what God's going to do in them and through them than worried about taking the next right step, right? The God that we serve, he like spoke the world into existence. He's got it figured out. He's got it figured out. And he says, I love you. I love you. And don't worry about tomorrow. Like he provides for the birds. He'll figure it out for us, right? And so we can anticipate God's kindness and goodness and revel in God's goodness and grace rather than being worried about what's next. When am I going to do this? Who am I going to marry? When am I going to? It's God's got this. And on the marriage piece, like I graduated from college at 21. I got married at 28. A lot of my friends got married sooner, and I was like, I'd like to get married. The wait was well worth it. Well worth it. And God was making me into the person I needed to be at 28 to get married, and my wife into the person she needed to get married. We got married when I was 28, she was 26. Well worth the wait. Don't rush marriage. Well worth the wait. Develop yourself, and as God gives you strength to grow in your own, develop who you are, who God made you to be, and trust God to lead you at the right time to the right person. And marriage is awesome.
Is it harder to eliminate roadblocks to discipline and efficiency, or to find balance in your usage of, say, social media, unhealthy foods, or drinks, or movies, or something like that?
It depends on the thing. For some things, total cutting off is probably better in eliminating the roadblock rather than trying to find balance. Like, for example, drinking soda. Just cut it off. Like, I don't need a soda a day or a soda a week. No, like it's really bad for you. Cut it off. I don't need that. For other things like an Instagram or social media, like that can be this vortex. I was listening to a podcast recently, and they said the average American spends 3 hours a day on social media. To me, that blows my mind. Our family, we don't have a TV. Why? Because we don't want to waste time or money on things that don't matter. If something's important enough to consume, we can probably find it on YouTube or something like that to consume that content. But we don't need to be mindlessly flipping through channels. And in today's world, a lot of people are mindlessly scrolling through shorts, like brain rot. And I like to produce more than I consume, right? And adding value to a marketplace. And one of the reasons I actually like using social media to produce content that is hopefully helpful and maybe somewhat engaging and demonstrating what me and my family do is because there is a world filled with not great content from a moral, spiritual standpoint. And if people are going to be online consuming content, I want to contribute at least something that can be life-giving and maybe encouraging or provoking or challenging in a God-oriented direction. And I remember C.S. Lewis actually in the essay Learning in Wartime, he says, why should we be learning about philosophy in school when the war is raging in World War II? Shouldn't we quit that and go fight that? And his conclusion was, well, for the believer, bad philosophy exists. And so good philosophy must exist to combat the bad philosophy. And we need to be working and striving. And there's a lot of, I'll say, bad philosophy demonstrated through terrible content out there. And we need to counter it with truth and love in a compelling way. And a lot of people are doing this wonderfully. And I'm just dabbling and trying to be a voice out there for good and for provoking and encouraging people towards Christ-likeness and maximizing the time that God has given them.
What is your perspective on adversity and bad news?
Great question. I don't like adversity. I don't like bad news, but it is an inevitable reality of the world that we're living in. So we should prepare for bad news. We should prepare for things we don't like. And for us to be strong, and the Bible says, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. So how do we get stronger so we don't faint in the day of adversity? We have to intentionally do hard things to strengthen us so when adversity does come, we don't faint. This is intellectual strength. This is physical strength. This is spiritual strength. This is relational strength. Developing relationships that in a time of adversity you can go to. Developing a walk with God so that in a time of adversity, you'll have that foundation. Developing intellectual capacity so that when something comes, your mind doesn't race to, but you can be settled and anchored in truth. Developing your body so that you don't cave and get sick and that you can handle stress and hard things that come your way through the work you've done before time. So bad news is something that we shouldn't live in fear of, but that we should prepare for.
How do we rely on God and not our preparation in those scenarios?
You just created an either or, and I would say it's a both and. We trust in God and rely on God and know that He has told us that if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small, so we should prepare. Our preparation is not in isolation of trusting God. It's because we trust God, we can and should prepare. In some ways, that's like saying, let's drive the car and let's not wear a seatbelt because we're trusting God. Well, we are trusting God, but we're wearing our seatbelt. That's like saying, God has promised to provide for my daily needs, so I don't need to go shopping for clothes, or I don't need to buy food or cook food. He's promised. The means through which He fulfills His promise is through the daily life that He has given to us to live, cooking the food, buying the clothes. And so they're not in isolation, but they complement one another. As we trust in God, He gives us the strength to make choices in our daily lives to prepare and to be ready for today and for tomorrow.
Perspective shift. What is your most important habit?
Most important habit. I'll go one in each of the categories from Luke 2:52. Ultimately, most important habit is time in the Word, relationship with God. So that we might, call that spiritual growth habit. Relational growth habit is my relationship with my wife. We, every week, right now it's currently Monday lunches. We eat lunch every Monday. We talk about our relationship, walk with the Lord. We talk about our kids, how we're raising them, what we want to see different. One of our goals this year is to do a family outreach every month. And so we plan our next family outreach. And we have a 5-year family plan. And we go over how we're doing on the 5-year family plan. And so that's probably the most important habit for the relational piece. For the physical piece, the most important habit is doing our daily workouts that our health coaches given to us and being consistent with those, and eating, and just the daily habits of nutrition and wellness and sleep. Sleep's important. Yeah, those are a lot of different habits that I'm not answering your question specifically, and I apologize. I'll try to isolate them.
What is the foundation of all the other habits that they build on? Is it sleep? Like if you get a good night's sleep, everything else is easier.
Well, that's true in any case. So sleep is really important. And for the most important intellectual habit, I like to listen to The Briefing by Al Mohler every day, Monday through Friday. It's about 20 minutes. I listen to it on 2 times speed, so it takes me 10 minutes. I do it usually right at the beginning of my exercise after my Bible reading and before any time in prayer and meditation, just hearing from him. And then the tagline for that is a daily analysis of news and events from a Christian worldview, and just analyzing what's going on in the world through his biblical worldview lens. And he's very gifted in communication and articulating what's going on and how it impacts us and how we can view it through a biblical worldview. So that's one thing, that's an intellectual habit that I would commend to others as well.
My next question was going to be, what is your favorite podcast?
I have a lot of favorite podcasts. That's probably my most frequently listened to podcast. There are other podcasts, some secular, some spiritual, that are helpful. Ask Pastor John is a good one just for quick theological questions. And that's kind of how I've modeled my podcast after college students. Just it's a quick question and a quick answer. So that's good. There's some like former military guys that have podcasts you may be familiar with. There's the Jocko podcast. Don't recommend everything on that podcast, but there's some helpful perspective on that podcast. And there's some other personal development podcasts that I found to be helpful with content. And there are different leadership podcasts. There's a John Maxwell leadership podcast that has helpful content from time to time. And so there's a lot of good options out there. There's another one called Founders Podcast. really interesting. I love
David
it.
Senra.
Yes. Biographies of
Yes.
founders. And he just started a new series where he does interviews with living founders. And so those have been really neat and helpful to listen to as well. So I get a lot of my leadership quotes from that podcast, from Founders Podcast.
It is really good. I love listening to his in-depth things. So tell us more about your Steps to Thrive podcast and where people can find you.
Sure. So Steps to Thrive is a podcast and blog that is designed to help and encourage young Christians who are passionate to grow. And this scratches a personal passion itch for me, since I don't, in my current daily workflow, interact with as many college students. And so I did that for a decade in the Center for Leadership Development. And I love it and I miss it. And so I'll usually work maybe on the weekends or in the evenings or early mornings on the Steps to Thrive content. It basically is an opportunity for students to, doesn't have to be students, it could be young college grads, questions just about anything. Similar to the Ask Pastor John, where someone will ask a theological question. The Steps to Thrive podcast platforms where people can ask questions, and I'll spend 3 to 5 minutes simply giving an answer to the question. And my perspective isn't the only perspective, and not always the right perspective. It's just a perspective that I'm happy to offer and encourage. And I'll often meet with students at lunch or different times, and I'll ask questions and I'll give answers. And I'll be like, man, I wish I could have shared that with a few more students. That was a great one-on-one, and so that's kind of the thought process. I can just get questions, answer them in front of a camera, and then make it available to those who may be interested to listen to. And so a few weeks into it, it's been a lot of fun. I'm just trying to learn how to do podcasting, as I want to be a lifelong learner as well. And so learning the game. And so we've had several hundred downloads so far, which is cool to see. I want to see that tick up as well and try to figure all that out. I want to provide value to young Christians who are passionate to grow. And over time, I'd like to include different interviews as well on the Steps to Thrive podcast with leaders who have impacted my life, who I know can pass along wisdom to a younger generation as well. So kind of tinkering with that and learning the game, and trying to make content available to people who are passionate to grow and want to take steps in the walk with the Lord and increase their capacity to serve. So there's stepstothrive.com, and there's @StepsToThrive on Instagram. And then you can just search for Steps to Thrive on any of the podcast platforms and find us there. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to reach out and ask questions or give feedback, we'd love to hear. Just trying to grow right alongside.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun, and thank you for sticking around till the end. And we'll have all those resources in many of the books that were mentioned and things linked in the description below. That's number 10, 1,000 to go.
No matter where you find this Christian Ambition podcast, if you get anything out of this, anything at all, please like, comment, and subscribe. But most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and leave us a review.